This is your Olympic hero and former WWE champion, Kurt Angle. And I just wanted to give a shout out to my guys, Clint and Noah. When it comes to covering sports, there is no one better. And believe me, that's true. It's damn true.
Gentlemen, you are the top 1%.
The elite. Best of the best.
But to be the man, you gotta beat the man. And I'm saying, woo! I'm the man. The best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be.
You know, when they talk about the elite. The elite. You ever see the elite? You're the elite. You are the elite.
You are now listening to the Elite Sports Podcast, brought to you by Vermeil Wines and powered by GASN Sports, the pinnacle of hard-hitting sports talk, featuring weekly expert analysis and top-notch interviews. And now, please welcome your hosts, Noah Gronniger and Clint Switzer.
And you are locked and loaded once again here on the Elite Sports Podcast. Clint Switzer and Noah Gronniger joining you as always. And Noah, it's going to be great today to welcome a brand new person to the podcasting realm, but certainly not someone new to broadcasting sports here in Kansas City. None other than former ATN WHB Between the Lines host Kevin Kietzman is going to be joining us here on this very show to talk about his new podcast, Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. You can get that on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, anywhere you find, well, our show. Noah, this is going to be tremendous to bring Kevin Kietzman on to the show here because he's someone that we've looked up to, both of us certainly, here in Kansas City. He's been an institution here 20 years. He hosted Between the Lines here on 810 WHB. He parted ways with 810 last year, and now here he is ready to host a podcast of his own. I think a lot of people are just ready to hear kind of what Kevin has to say about some of the goings-on. Chiefs win the Super Bowl 2020. All of it's going to be featured on his show, Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. This is going to be exciting, man, to have him on.
It really is, and I'm looking forward to listening to his podcast and just asking him kind of what's ahead in the future. Does he ever plan on going back to radio? Does he know yet? And just like you mentioned, the Super Bowl, Patrick Mahomes, the coronavirus, and Black Lives Matter, this movement, and the NBA postponing games. What are we going to see moving forward with the NFL season and the kneeling? Alex Smith coming back. There's just so many issues that we've been wanting to hear Kevin Kietzman's thoughts on, and we haven't been able to. So here today, we're going to get them. And of course, moving forward, you can get them on his podcast, Kevin Kietzman Has Issues.
Really excited to do it with Kevin. I tell you, he's somebody, we've been a guest on his show before on Between the Lines when we released our first SEC football documentary, Stadium Crashers. He had us in studio. It was tremendous. I've always had a high respect for Kevin. He's someone that has become a lightning rod because he has more of a conservative voice. I believe that he was sort of ostracized and ran out based on some of those political viewpoints that he has. And I think we're going to find that Kevin is someone kind of like us, someone that had no interest in talking about politics. It's sports. This is what we do here on the Elite Sports Podcast. We want no part of it. Well, guess what, guys? 2020 has made that virtually impossible because now it is everywhere. It's inundated every bit of sports. You talked about Black Lives Matters and the NBA sort of sitting out the games this week, and they're getting back to playing, certainly. So really, I don't really know what the whole thing was about. Really, to me, it's about what LeBron James thinks and what the blue checkmark Twitter brigade thinks, and then they go from there. So I'm not really sure how consolidated the movement is, but we looked at it today. It's crossing all sports. Kentucky had a walkout today during their football practice. Major League Baseball has seen a couple games that didn't occur as a result. So it's in our faces, Noah. We had Jason Whitlock on this show, about a month ago, and he said, guys, sports broadcasters are going to start having to get uncomfortable with the way they view these incidents. And I guess that's where we are. You know, our show, we pride ourselves on being a podcast that does interviews, elite interviews. That's why we're called the Elite Sports Podcast, because of the interviews, the people we have on this show to talk about their careers, to talk about these issues. So Noah, I guess here we are now sort of being thrust unwillingly into a political realm, but I guess that's just 2020 for you. And there's no hiding it. There's no escaping COVID-19 or politics bleeding over into every aspect of our lives.
Well, you said it right there. And just to go back to the LeBron James issue, there was a report last night that he was upset and just frustrated that the Bucks came out first. They didn't let it be known throughout all of the NBA and especially to LeBron James, that they were going to do this. And people are speculating that he's upset because he wasn't the face to this. The Bucks were the ones leading the charge and talking about postponing games and standing up for this issue and what happened to Blake in Wisconsin. And LeBron James, he wanted to be the face. He wanted to be out there. He wanted to make a tweet and lead the charge and have his name and face be out there leading this. And so that kind of brings into question his motives with all of this and everything that's going on, that he just wants to be the face of this movement and get the notoriety for it. And he's upset that the Bucks were the ones to do it.
Well, the truth of it is, we're only 2 weeks away from today of the NFL kickoff. It's Chiefs and Texans. And I think that instead of thinking about, wow, what's this team going to look like? We haven't seen, all we see is, training camp videos. We haven't had a lot of coverage of training camp, COVID-19, no preseason games. Instead of going in this game with gusto, thinking about hanging, the banner, the Lombardi Trophy is in Kansas City, man, and it feels so good. But instead of greeting a group of 53 champions, I feel like that this is going to be inundated with who's kneeling, who's standing, what was the reaction to, the Black National Anthem. I have a feeling that is going to override the night, and I think that's unfortunate because all this time, 6 months into this thing now, man, I've been waiting. We've been thirsting for football. We know a lot of our listeners are the exact same way as us. You know what? You say NBA goes away. Okay. No Major League Baseball. Who? What? You start talking about no NFL, no college football. It's like saying shark at a beach, man. What's this going to look like? And on a bigger note, is the NFL in danger of losing viewership over some of this media-driven stuff?
That is the big question. And I've just heard in my own family them talking about if they do that Black Lives Matter, if there's people kneeling, I'm not watching. You hear that all over social media as well. And so that is a big question. What's going to happen with this season? Are they going to lose tons of viewership and attendance when there is full capacity back in stadiums? And what is this going to be? The Chiefs, are they ever going to have a ring ceremony? Are we ever going to get to see them actually receive their rings? And is it going to be about football, or is it going to be fully about politics? Hopefully when the ball is kicked off, finally they will stop talking about who kneeled, who didn't kneel, what were some of the looks on people's faces when the Black National Anthem was played, what are the broadcasters' opinions on it, and we can just get down to football and get back to sports and just watch and talk about the sport that we love and kind of leave all this other stuff by the wayside, at least for that 3 hours. Can I ask that, at least for that 3 hours? Can I get that?
We're going to work on that for you. We're going to see how much that is the case. So, guys, we're going to get to our interview here with Kevin Kietzman, so please stay tuned. We're going to get to that right here on the other side of the break. Noah, let's face it, if you go anywhere these days, you need a mask.
That's right, Clint. If you go to the bank or the gym or even the store, you're going to be required to wear one for the foreseeable future.
If you're going to be rocking a mask, why not do it in style while celebrating the Chiefs Super Bowl victory in the process?
Absolutely. Visit our friends at Noble Apparel to check out all their selections of masks that come in all styles, from Frozen to Spider-Man, and of course our defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs.
Noble Apparel is KC born and bred, and their merchandise is by Chiefs fans for Chiefs fans.
Visit NobleApparelKC.com or check them out on Facebook today at Noble Apparel 816.
What's up?
You guys hear me all right?
We can.
Yeah.
Awesome. How you guys been?
Great, man. We you got the mic set up, I see.
Yeah.
You're ready to roll.
I did my first 3 podcasts, and we're waiting on Apple approval here before I launch them. So.
That's tremendous. I was just looking because I was trying to subscribe on some of my podcast apps, so going to be on the lookout for that. Kevin, this is so exciting to have you on. Welcome to the Elite Sports Podcast, man. This is a true pleasure. I never thought we'd actually be interviewing you someday. We were on your show several years ago promoting a documentary we made called Stadium Crashers, but welcome to the show, man. How's everything been going? I know that's a loaded question in 2020.
Everybody wonders how I'm doing. I'm doing great, Clint. Everything is good, man. Life's good.
Oh, glad to hear it. We're excited about the podcast coming up. Kevin Kietzman Has Issues. That's the name of the show. We're excited about it. First off, why the podcast route? I'm sure a lot of radio stations in the area would have been glad to have brought you on board. Why the podcast route?
Well, it was really my only option. I'd taken the buyout for my company. I sold all the shares in my company, and as part of the buyout, as is typical in business, there are restrictions on what you can and can't do competing against said business that has bought you out. So they've bought me out, and I've got a couple more years that I can't really do radio. So here I am doing a podcast. Took me a while to let them get me to do a podcast, but I need to do something because I really miss it.
Well, what are your plans for the future? Talking about that, you said a couple more years. Do you have intentions of going back to radio when that is up and you're able to do so?
At this point, I can't even think about it. I mean, there's no opportunity for me to do that because I've signed the contract and I'm going to be doing what it is that I'm doing right now. This is all really interesting to me. I'm going to try to do it daily. It's going to be shorter. It's going to be less work. I've been talking about that my last couple of years on the radio. I've been talking to my partners about maybe working a little bit less. 23 years of 4 hours a day every afternoon was a grind. And no, it did not. It definitely did not end the way I wanted it to end last summer. There's nothing. I won't hide any of that. But I'm getting to a place now where I wanted to get, and if I can find a way to monetize this just a little bit, combined with the buyout that I took, I'm going to be just fine. I think I have a lot to offer, a lot to say. I'll see if people want to hear from me or not. If they don't, I'm probably not going to do it as a hobby. In 6 months or something, if it doesn't work, I'll walk away and figure something else out. But if I get people listening, I'm going to be real excited about that.
Well, I think people are really ready to hear your voice again and hear your takes, especially in a year so much has happened, Kevin. My goodness, this year started off so well. Chiefs win Super Bowl 54. It's been sort of a slow decline since then. But what was it like for you personally as the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, the first year you're not on the air in 20 years, the Chiefs make this magical run, and people, I lived every day, every week. We couldn't wait to hear what you would say on a Monday about the previous Chiefs game. What was it like for you kind of not being able to speak out about the team during this run?
Well, I don't know how many people personally care about, what I had to endure. We're doing okay. There's a lot of people out there with hardships with the pandemic and losing their job that can't make ends meet and all that. We've not had that. We've not been in a situation where, life was in ruins or anything like that. Personally, after 35 years covering sports in Kansas City, would I have liked to have gone to a Super Bowl where the Chiefs were playing and winning and covering it professionally? That would have been great. I'm not going to ask anybody to feel sorry for me. That's just not the way I roll. And I would have loved to have done it. We talked about going as fans and kind of decided not to, just with, how much tickets were and all that crazy stuff. We threw a heck of a party at our house in Lenexa. I have a nice patio out back with a big fire pit and a TV that's covered, and turned out to be a 70-degree day. We sat out there all night and smoked cigars when it was over, shot off some fireworks. Sorry, Lenexa Fire Department. But we had a great time out there and memories of a lifetime. We actually, on my back patio that I had built, I actually just got it built before the Royals won the World Series in 2015. It's a really nice place. It's covered, and it's really neat. A few weeks later, the Royals won the World Series. We were out there on that Sunday night enjoying it on a beautiful day in Kansas City, and then we enjoyed the Super Bowl out there the same way. So it's been no shortage of good times for us. Professionally, I would have loved to have been there covering the Super Bowl, but come on. There'll be more chances, right? I'm young.
I believe so.
Absolutely. And just as we talk about this pandemic and the Chiefs are on this run it back tour, what are your thoughts on some of the opt-outs? Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, he's an orderly up in Canada in an assisted living situation. Damian Williams is taking care of his mom who has cancer. Rookie Lucas Niang was a little odd to hear about him opting out. And how do you think the season will play out with no preseason games? How many regular season games do you think we actually get in?
I support anybody that opts out. I think they all have valid reasons, and Dr. Duvernay-Tardif is the best reason. If he wants to, he's taken an oath. If his life is truly dedicated to serving as a doctor and helping other people, that's a much higher calling than football. I get it. And I believe him. When he says that's what he wants to do and go do it, he does it. I think that's great, man. If your mom is high risk like mine is, and you live with her, I don't live with my mom. She lives separate from us. But if my mom lived here with us, I wouldn't be going to an office and working. I wouldn't be leaving the house much. If she were high risk, I'd be the same way. So I respect and understand anybody with the pandemic. I respect and admire it. That being said, I think we've overblown the whole thing. That's just me personally. I think the pandemic is almost completely overblown with young athletes. If one of the Chiefs players got coronavirus, yes, it could be a problem if they gave it to someone else. But I must be missing the stories of all these positive tests of athletes that are sick. They're testing positive. I think the Royals had, 7 or 8 guys that tested positive? None of them were sick. Not a one of them had a symptom. Now, you got to keep them away from their teammates because you can't have it, go crazy or whatever. But if you're living your life and you're not exposing your mom who's high risk or someone else that's high risk and you're going home and taking care of business, I feel like we need to be living our lives. I'm different than most. I think the kids should be in school. I think the Big Ten and the Pac-12 are a joke. I think they should be playing football. I believe that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 players by far are going to be testing if they tested them like they test the other players in the other leagues, there'd be way more positive tests in those leagues because they're not playing football. I think football is going to help people stay clean, stay within the system, and not become a positive test to COVID. I never say sick from COVID or get COVID, just a positive test. I think they made a mistake in the Big Ten and the Pac-12. I think they're actually if they're talking about the health of the kids, I think they've put them in a worse spot. As far as the team this year that you asked about, what better setup could you possibly have? I mean, nobody wanted the pandemic. Nobody wanted all these things to happen. But the Chiefs returned pretty much everybody from the team that won it all in a season where the other teams can't practice. They can't get their offenses up and running. If there's a new quarterback in place or a new coach or whatever, those teams are miles behind the Chiefs. This is the greatest setup ever if the Chiefs are hungry and take it seriously. They really are the only ones that can stand in their own way here. I'm a little concerned about games without fans. What's the emotion level? There's just no way to predict. We watched the NBA start up. The Lakers clearly didn't care about the games in the bubble in the regular season. The Bucks weren't very good. The Phoenix Suns had the best record in the bubble in the regular season. I think they went 7-0 or 8-0. Those are weird things, but those games had a strange dynamic. I'm a little worried for the Chiefs in that regard, but as the way the season sets up, it couldn't be better.
Kevin, I want to ask you a little bit about sports media and where it's heading, because you've been, for whatever reason, sort of a lightning rod on Twitter and things like of that nature, just for having an opposing viewpoint from many of the from just the average blue checkmark social media brigade. At what point in your career did you see kind of the tides changing? Because we had Jason Whitlock on this show from Outkick, and we talked about how, you know, if you're in this to cover sports, you're going to have to start viewing this from a different lens. Tough for us, for Noah and I. We got in this to cover sports. It's a distraction. Sports are changing before our very eyes. I get it. But at some point, people, you know, like yourself, started getting chastised for kind of having a different political opinion from that of most in the media. And when did you see that kind of coming down the pike?
My first job in Joplin in 1986. I mean, you go in a TV newsroom where I went to work in Joplin as a sports guy, and I was like you. I'm like, I like sports. I don't care about this other stuff. But pretty much everyone in there was leaned left and was of liberal thinking. Then I went to work at Channel 4. Myself and Harris Faulkner, who's now with Fox News, were probably the only two conservatives in the entire newsroom. But I was a sports guy, so it didn't matter. I'd have arguments or something, you know, in the newsroom with Dave Helling or some of the reporters or whatever. It was fun. It was not mean like it is today. We would just talk about things. And I didn't really know that I was political. I just didn't know. I just had this view of the world, didn't realize that I was about to work the next 35 years with people that were completely different than me in that regard. I think it led to my success in radio. AM radio and sports radio is male heavy. It is white male heavy. It is conservative white male heavy. I think that benefited me. All the things when I commented on sports, when I talk about, you know, kneeling for the anthem, which is more recent, but if I go all the way back, if we go, you know, way back to some of the other things that we talked about on the show, if you're a conservative versus a liberal, you just view the world in a different way. And I could be talking about straight sports, and that would come out. And people within the media, and there have not been a lot of other people in the media in Kansas City that ever really liked me. I didn't get, you know, very fair media last year when this all happened. Nobody's called me. You know, the Star hasn't called and said, hey, let's do a follow-up. Wonder how Kevin's doing or what's going on there. They're not going to. They're just glad the conservative guy in the sports media is gone. And I stayed away as much as I could from politics, but we can't do that anymore. I mean, LeBron James has changed it all. We can't do it anymore. And the NBA's walking off the floor, not playing. I mean, if we get into the details, we just jump to conclusions on all these things so fast. Nobody wants to ask the question, and this is a legitimate question. Would George Floyd have died if that cop never touched him? If he just laid there in cuffs, when we know the toxicology report and what was in him, and he was foaming at the mouth, he was having this psychotic episode where he thought people were coming after him and he was claustrophobic and he said, I can't breathe all these times before the knee on the neck. Knee on the neck was despicable. I don't know how the Minneapolis Police Department made that part of their policy. I don't think most Americans know that what that cop did was actually in the handbook as something that he can do. How that can be, I don't even understand that. I'm with everyone else. What I saw was horrible. I'm horrified by what I saw. But is anybody asking the question, would he have died either way? They were waiting on an ambulance to come getting him. They weren't hauling him off to jail. So we have all these reactions to these things, and nobody wants to look at the facts. I don't know what they are. I'm not going to sit here and say I know one way or the other. The new one in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The young man's mom was on CNN last night with Don Lemon, and she's saying, stop rioting, okay? Stop. Don't do it. And, you know, my son has issues. And Don Lemon says, what would you say to Donald Trump if you could say something to him? And she said, this is his mom, the guy who got shot 7 times. She said, I would say, I apologize for what one of my relatives said about you, Mr. President, and I'm sorry I missed your phone call. And Don Lemon's like, well, you're not going to hear that from LeBron James, but this is the guy who walks into a news conference after a game last week with the autobiography of Malcolm X in his hand. And a reporter says toward the end, they've asked all the basketball questions, hey, nice book. What's your biggest takeaway from Malcolm X in the autobiography? And he says, oh, I don't have one yet. I'm just starting reading it. Really? You brought it into a news conference to show it to everyone in the media. You haven't read a paragraph of the book yet. These are things that don't get talked about. It's so easy to just walk away from something and say, Black Lives Matter. And they do. I don't know anybody that doesn't agree with that sentiment. Black lives absolutely matter. Black Lives Matter, Inc. has become a political organization. And for the NBA to step up on it and say, we're with them, that's the Democrats. That's the far left Democrats. The NBA says, we'll take that. Do they think that conservative Americans are going to deal with that and watch the NBA? I don't know how they think they're going to do that. These leagues have got a lot of hard choices to make. And if they think people aren't smart enough to know the difference between a sentiment, something that people think, which is positive, and that is Black Lives Matter, and let's treat African Americans and Asian Americans and Hispanics all equally, male, female, young, old. Let's all treat each other equally. Everybody I know agrees with that. But if you start talking about the politics behind it, I know a lot of people that don't agree with it. That doesn't show up in sports. When we see these people walking away or not playing or doing what they're doing, all we know is guy got shot in the back 7 times. Okay, he was a previous criminal. He had committed 2 criminal acts before that happened. One was where he was not supposed to be. The call came in. He was an ex-convict, and he was on probation, not supposed to be around the person. Then they tase him. That doesn't work. He resists arrest. He goes away from him. He's got a knife, and he's reaching in his car. I don't know, man. It's hard. I've never been a cop. What are you going to do when somebody's reaching for a weapon if you're a cop? What are you going to do? I don't have these answers. I can't fix society. I just don't think we should rush to judgment in any of them. I've been around long enough to know. Listen, let me make a different kind of analogy. I remember when Nicole Brown Simpson was killed. Mm-hmm. Nobody thought OJ. Nobody. The first few days, like nobody's like, oh my God, OJ's wife is dead. And there he is, and he looks distraught. And you get all this stuff. What's the rush to judgment? Oh, she's got a boyfriend. The boyfriend's dead too. Uh-oh, this is crazy. Now what's going on? It took forever to get the facts in that thing. But if that happened today, what would the rush to judgment be? I don't know, but we better back off on some of these things, and just allowing people to go riot and burn things because something happens, that doesn't make any sense either. And then this idiot kid from Illinois, the 17-year-old that takes an assault rifle, crosses state lines and says, I'll go police it myself. That's equally bad. That's worse than bad, okay? Both sides need to settle down, and my fear is that sports is sort of, snowballing this thing. The more we see NBA players walk off, or we're going to have this problem or that problem, people are just going to get madder and madder. And I know they want to draw attention to their case. We know what the case is. I feel like every time this stuff is coming up now, it's doing more harm than good.
Absolutely. And just to stay on that, the Blake situation, the NBA players, they get together, they postpone. They are going to come back here pretty soon. But I wanted to ask you also about Black Lives Matter, people kneeling for the national anthem. Just what kind of long-term effects is that going to have on fan viewership and attendance?
First of all, it needs to be said they absolutely have the right to kneel for the anthem. You have the right to do anything you want. This is free speech, freedom of speech. But it goes both ways. And people like me don't feel that. My friends and the people that I know in my family or whatever that are conservative like I am, we feel completely silenced. Cannot speak. Tape over the mouth. Shut up. Don't. Because you're going to get doxxed, or social media is coming after you, or they're going to try to get you fired from your job. Whatever it may be, you cannot talk about it in the workplace. You cannot say what you think. So freedom of speech doesn't really exist. And the left likes to say, oh, there's freedom of speech, but it has consequence. I'm like, really? They talk about white privilege. What about liberal privilege? Is there anything bigger in this country than liberal privilege? I mean, if you ascribe to that, you can't get fired. I mean, you got to commit a crime. You got to do something crazy to get fired. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot going on. I think we're going to get to a point where there's so much kneeling that it becomes sort of blasé. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know. It doesn't offend me as much right now as it did when Marcus Peters was doing it a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, or Kaepernick. So I've grown more used to it. And I recognize if I truly want to be a person of my word and my conviction and believe in the foundations and principles of this country, they have the right to do it. Now, I don't have to like them. I don't have to buy their jersey. I don't have to, associate with it in any way, shape, or form because I hate it. They got the right to do it. And I think we'll find that more people that think like I do believe that and are not, too crazy about getting on those people for it. But I don't. The Chiefs. It's a weird city to ask what's going to happen with this because this city's not. It doesn't. Every player on that team can kneel on September 10th, and this entire city's going to watch that football game. So it doesn't really matter. And my hope is that once the games start, we're not inundated with like the NBA. You can't watch the NBA without seeing the Black Lives Matter on the floor. I mean, they've made it their point that that's what their shortened season is all about. I don't think the NFL is going to be like that. I think we'll see it. I think there's going to be signs and paintings and whatever. But then we might also see folds of honor, or some sort of a military foundation or something. We may see a lot of different things out there at Arrowhead Stadium. This is the wrong town to ask because I don't somehow football trumps all this stuff. And, I don't like people kneeling, but I'm watching the Chiefs. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, that exactly. And that you mentioned, the Big Ten and Pac-12 calling it a day and doing so early in the process. Commissioner Kevin Warren from the Big Ten kind of under fire here. A lot of the ADs saying there was a vote today. This would be 14-0. We're playing. What is going on? The Pac-12 always seemed iffy from the get-go. You're dealing with California. They seemed like they wanted out 6 months ago when the very first case entered America. What is this college football season going to look like? The SEC has maintained a very cavalier attitude towards this. We cover Mizzou every day. We appreciate the fact that we have a team to cover at the very least. This is going to be wild, and they're going to have a college football playoff without the Pac-12 and Big Ten. I guess that's not too far of a stretch if you think about it. But what are these conferences doing? And the Big Ten, Nebraska's there's a lawsuit. 8 parents have served a lawsuit towards the University of Nebraska. And what's the end game of this? They can't reverse the decision now.
Well, there's a lot to digest there. The Pac-12, in my opinion, they follow the Big Ten. The Big Ten made a decision the Pac-12 is going to follow. That's just the way that conference has worked. But the Pac-12 was hamstrung a lot by the state of California. I mean, they knew what was going on. The governor there, and so much of California is closed. The way we're living here in Kansas City, I don't think we can understand what's still going on in California. It's like what we were dealing with in maybe April and May. And so it was going to be really complicated in California to pull all that off. I think they knew that, and I think the conference knew that. They were just waiting for the Big Ten to make the step up. The linchpin to the Big Ten was Kevin Warren, the commissioner of the league. And not much reporting on his background. But if you go look before the decisions were made about COVID and the questions were being asked, are we going to play football in the Big Ten or not? Kevin Warren was in the NFL for a long time. He got the job. He went from the Vikings to the Big Ten office. He implemented a couple things that are very, very important long before this decision was made with the pandemic and whatever. One of the things that he was adamant about was educating the student athletes of the Big Ten about social justice with police. That was a very important cause for him. And he started, this is what universities do. They teach that professors, we know the way they lean, whatever. He wanted to implement that. There are 10,000 student athletes in the Big Ten. That was his initiative. Let's get some social justice going here in the Big Ten. Okay, he felt that was important. Then this summer, again, before the pandemic thing is done or whatever, he implements a program where they're going to register all 10,000 athletes and teach them to vote. Mm-hmm. Which sounds great when they say it's nonpartisan. But come on. All you got to do is know what Kevin Warren is about and that he wants this to happen. And we know it's not nonpartisan. So many of these things that we've seen happen in this country are about getting Donald Trump out of office. They are. And a lot of people want to dismiss it and say that's too simple, that's too whatever. No. If this is your thing, if you really are into politics, if you really care, I mean, like way more than the three of us, if you really care, whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, you're going to try to do something to get your guy to win. That's what Americans do. And Kevin Warren was in a position to do it. And I think he's trying to create mayhem. I can't think of one good reason to not play football. We're not seeing trouble in these sports. They're not having trouble. The NBA said 0. Oh, one dude goes to Atlanta to a strip club. Okay, so he tests positive, right? The NHL 0, correct? Baseball's had a bunch. If I remember right, everybody was saying a week into the baseball season, it's over.
It's over, yeah.
It's over. We'll never finish this season. The Marlins have ruined it for everybody. It's over. Well, no, I looked the other day. They're catching up. They've played almost as many games as the Royals. So they figured this thing out. I think it's important to draw a distinction between testing positive and being sick. And So they're testing, I talked with an executive with the Royals who was frustrated. Says, we're paying these athletes all these money. They're 25 years old. They're just completely healthy. And we catch a COVID test and send a $9 million athlete home for 2 weeks. That's frustrating. But no, there's not a reason to not play sports. Nobody's getting sick. Nobody's got it's crazy. In the Big Ten and Pac-12 football players and in the other sports, they should be playing too. I can't see a reason right now why they shouldn't be playing football.
Yeah, we're with you there. And I got to ask you about Alex Smith. You covered him during his entire tenure here in Kansas City. They had the Project 11 come out, and he's been cleared for football activities with the Washington football team. Just what do you think about that, his trials and tribulations in Washington with that injury and now coming back, and looks like he's trying to play again?
We hear a lot, and through the years we've heard a lot about different athletes in sports, about how dedicated they are to staying in shape, improving their craft, doing whatever. Alex Smith's the top of my list. The top. Even, some great people. Like I watched George Brett in his career go from a guy that didn't care at all until he got in his 30s, and he's like, whoa, okay, I better do a little running here, maybe lift a weight or two or do whatever. And he became really fit toward the end of his career. He actually, if you go back and look at his pictures, he probably looked better at the end of his career than his beginning. Some athletes do that over time. Alex Smith's crazy. The first year I was out there interviewing him, I remember seeing this picture of him at the bottom of the ocean with the snorkel mask on. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this picture. It's off the place where he lives in Hawaii. But he would walk into the water out like waist deep, and he'd have a trainer with him. And they gave him this giant boulder. And he would hold this boulder, and he would walk into the water and see how long he could stay underwater and keep walking. Can you imagine how heavy that would be in the water, weighting you down, and see how far you could go underwater until he would drop it and then go up and get air? I'm like, are you crazy? Who even thinks of something like that? The fact that he's going to come back and try and play does not surprise me. He loves the game. He loves working out and studying film and all those things as much as playing the game. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. I don't know how good he can be. I thought a big part of his game was moving around, running out of the pocket, getting first downs on 3rd and 6 where he'd scramble out and get it. I can't see him doing that. I also know a lot of quarterbacks that once they got hurt, they were gun shy. They were never quite the same in the pocket. They got happy feet and they threw it faster. That's the sports analysis, but I wouldn't put anything past him. The fact that he's come back and he's going to try to play is absolutely astonishing. If he plays at a high level and he's good, it'll be one of the greatest comeback stories ever.
Well, Kevin, I got to ask you about 3 area college football coaches here. First year for Eli Drinkwitz at Mizzou. Meanwhile, a couple of second-year guys at Kansas and Kansas State. And, of course, Chris Kleiman and Les Miles. So where are these programs at here? There's 3 programs. They're going to play football, so we're going to keep an eye on them. What do you see coming from these 3? I know this is kind of a broad stroke question when you're talking about 3 different programs. What do you see from these 3 area schools, and what can we look for this year? Missouri's turned over their schedule from Louisiana and Central Michigan to Alabama and LSU. I don't know what you do to judge a coach from that, but perhaps Miles and Kleiman, a little more standard from them, but it's going to be crazy.
Eli Drinkwitz got the worst draw of any first-year head coach ever. I mean, this is unbelievable what they've done with his schedule and what he has to do. It's just a terrible, terrible thing. Now, it's an odd year. It's a honeymoon year. Nobody's going to hold him to anything, so it's going to be okay. I've not met the man. I don't know. I've studied his record a little bit. I listened to him talk. He sounds like he totally gets it. He also sounds like he wishes he didn't have to put the head coach muzzle on. Like he'd like to do what we're doing right now. Right. Just get on and let it fly. I think he'd love to just start ripping the SEC for what they did to him with the schedule and some of the things that have happened. I think he's football. I think the COVID thing probably has just worn him out, and he's like, I can't even believe this is happening to me. I'm here at this dream job. I'm optimistic for the future. I think the guy can coach, and he seems like he might be a really nice fit with the University of Missouri and the people in the state of Missouri. I just don't know that we're going to get to see that this year. I think we're going to have to wait some time. We're going to have to wait a little more time on Les Miles. We didn't see a lot out of his team last year. People will expect a little bit more. But again, this pandemic and no fans and the weird schedule and not much of a non-con and all that, I don't know how you judge these guys. For Kleiman, it's probably a blessing because he won 8 games last year in his first year. I mean, it was a really good first year. It was a step up from Bill Snyder. So do K-State fans expect too much? Probably. You go beat Oklahoma and Kansas and win 8 games your first year, they're probably going to expect it again. That's probably too much, and maybe they'll be able to blame it on COVID or the empty stadium or whatever if it doesn't happen. I don't know exactly what K-State will have, but I do think each program and each coach in college, more so than the NFL, I don't think the NFL gets the same pass because they have so many resources and stuff. I think each coach here in our area pretty much gets a free season here just because of the circumstances. And you know what? They're going week to week not knowing if their commissioner is going to pull the plug on them. I think in the NFL, if they pull the plug, it's only for a couple of weeks, then we're going to start back up.
Right.
In college, the kids are probably looking at their phone every day wondering, I wonder if we're getting axed today, Because it literally, if something goes bad at Oklahoma State and they get 30-some kids with COVID, they could pull the plug on the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And just you've covered Kansas City and sports here for a long time. The Chiefs, just better than us just how they've been in quarterback purgatory for most of our lives. How unbelievable is it that the Chiefs moved up from 27-10 to get Patrick Mahomes, and he is what he is, the face of the league right now? What is unbelievable is how long they went without. Between Len Dawson and Patrick Mahomes, I would sit there every year and I would say over and over, and I always get the haters on Twitter always go, "Oh, you would have drafted Geno Smith," and I always say, "No, I would have drafted whoever my general manager said to draft." I always said if I were the owner, we have the number one pick in the draft, I'm taking a quarterback, unless I have Patrick Mahomes, okay? And that would be anytime I am on the clock in the first round and nobody's taking a quarterback, I would take one. And if my GM fails, if Brett Veach picked the wrong guy, I'd fire him. He'd be gone and I'd try again. Nobody in this town tried. They didn't really try. Seriously, they didn't really try. Carl Peterson was completely against drafting a quarterback. He didn't believe in developing. He thought, let other teams develop him. It's too high risk. Carl was making a big salary. If I go draft a guy and it doesn't work out, I can lose my job. That's what Carl thought. So he held the team back all those years. The Stedman years weren't very good. We know that they flamed out on a couple of picks. Todd Blackledge, 83. They tried, I guess. What was Blackledge? The third one taken of the 5? Mm-hmm. Maybe he wasn't the first. But so that didn't work out. But they went all these years where they didn't really try. And then all of a sudden, Andy Reid gets to town. And if you think about what they did from the second he got here, when they got Alex Smith, I wasn't the happiest guy in the world. I'm like, oh, boy. I'd watched Alex Smith play, and I thought, I don't know if this is the right guy. All they did was attack the quarterback position. They got Alex Smith. They drafted other guys. They brought in veteran backups. That's all he's done is attack the quarterback position. And they didn't stop. When they had Alex Smith out there winning 12 games and going to the playoffs, they draft Patrick Mahomes. And you know what? In 4 years, probably, when this contract's coming due or whatever, maybe they'll draft another, thinking it may be too expensive to keep him. I don't know. All I know is Andy Reid is quarterback. Nothing else matters in this league. You can get to the playoffs. You might be able to win a Super Bowl with a defense. Doesn't happen very often. You might be able to do that with a crappy quarterback and a really good defense. But the way to do this long-term is to get that quarterback. And the way to get the quarterback isn't that you're just smarter than everyone else. It's a numbers game. You got to keep trying and never stop trying. And, man, the Chiefs hit the home run on Mahomes. It's great. This is maybe the greatest marriage between a coach and a quarterback in the NFL. I mean, you guys want to throw some nominations out? You could talk about Belichick and Brady, but Belichick's a defensive coach. Yeah. I'm talking about the actual relationship between the head coach and the quarterback. Drew Brees and Sean Payton may be one of them, but
yeah, there's been some good ones, but I think this might become, if Andy coaches long enough, the best of all time.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, can't tell you how much we appreciate it, man. Before we let you go, tell us a little bit, as far as the podcast goes. Kevin Kietzman's got issues. You're uploading some of the first episodes right now. What can fans expect? Can they expect a little bit about what kind of how we just did this year? We expect some free-flying Kevin Kietzman, some off the cuff, some bring in hard as always. What can people expect? We want to know exactly what we're getting into here, Kevin, because we're excited to hear it, and we're also where we can find it. We know on Twitter you're at Kevin Kietzman KK Has Issues. So where else can we get you?
The website is kkhasissues.com. If you go there, you can catch it. Podbean's my site host. It's Apple, Spotify, Google Play. It's going to be everywhere here. I've basically done 3 preview podcasts to put them out there and to get approved by, you guys know how this works, Spotify, Apple, to get approved and go through the process. That's where I am at this moment, but people can get it right now, kkhasissues.com. If you want to go check it out, there's 3 episodes there. Episode number 1 is my story. I haven't been on the air for a year, and I tell my story, the whole story. So, and then that's it. I'm not bringing it up again on any other podcast. Beginning September 8th, that's the Tuesday before the Chiefs opener, I will drop a podcast there at 10 a.m. I'm going to go 10 a.m. every day, Monday through Friday, probably 45 minutes to an hour long, 2 or 3 segments. I've got some sponsors lined up that are going to help me out, which is unbelievable. I'm going to try to make a buck or 2 podcasting. We'll see. And I hope people listen. I'm going to work real hard every day and see if I can't make that happen.
Kevin, it's just great to see you. Great to hear your voice again. It's been missed for the last year, just from a personal standpoint. We always enjoy it. So glad we're able to catch up with you here, my friend, and best of luck with the podcast. We will definitely be promoting it heavily, getting it out there for you as much as we can. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Clint. Thanks, Noah. Appreciate you guys, and thanks for having me on.
Well, Noah, I will say you can chalk that up to something that I never thought would occur 8-10 years ago, interviewing Kevin Kietzman for our podcast. Here it is. It has happened. Now, Kevin, a podcaster himself. I'm so excited to hear from it. You heard him really bringing it during that interview, and I think that's just a taste of what people can expect on his show. We got into a lot of things there. And, the truth of it is I agree with him on a lot of what he said, especially the Big Ten and Pac-12 not playing football this season and kind of the political agenda behind it. My goodness, you just hate to hear things like that. There's so many kids' livelihoods at stake. You've got parents from Nebraska trying to sue the team. I mean, this is unbelievable. We're going to have a college football season without those conferences, and will it even get off? Will University of Alabama has already got hundreds of cases. Is Missouri and Alabama, the opening game, in jeopardy already? You've talked about it from the get-go. At this point, I'm just hoping we get these games in and that we can, put our heads down, get it through a football season, because really that's all we have, man. Football, it drives the boat. It stirs the drink. That's what we're hoping to sort of get us through some of this crap that we're dealing with right now. That's the best way I can say it.
Yeah, I mean, we just want to get it in, whatever that looks like, whatever that means. Get the full season in. Even if it's not the full complement of games in the NFL, if we're playing 12 instead of 16, whatever it is, we need the playoffs. We need to crown a champion. We got to get through this season. Same thing in college. We need a national championship. We got to crown a champion there. So we've just got to get through these seasons, whatever that looks like. Just going back to Kevin Kietzman and having him on, and what a pleasure and a thrill and an honor that was, is he interviewed us back in the day talking about our film Stadium Crashers, asking us about that. And who would have thought that we would be interviewing him and talking about his podcast and what he's got coming up. It was a huge thrill for us. And another thing that he talked about that I thought was interesting and true is nobody wants to hear the conservative voice or the conservative perspective. So when people talk about, there's freedom of speech out there, everyone gets to have their voice heard. No, now it's the conservative voice that isn't heard. If you don't have that liberal viewpoint or opinion, you're being shut up and not being heard and not wanting to be heard out there. So people are attacking you and telling you to close down your account if it's on social media, to stop your podcast if you're out there with that opinion, because only the liberal voice is being heard right now.
That is very well said, Noah. And I feel like that as people that I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not a political person. It's almost like my hand is being forced. Like you have to take a side, like The Warriors or something, the 1979 movie. Like I do that reluctantly, and I do have a view of the world, and I do think that my views are kind of conflicting, whether liberal or conservative. I don't know. I still don't know what I am, to be honest with you. So maybe that's good. To be a fence sitter might be the way to go these days. Yeah,
I think I'm a centrist. Like, I guess I have some sort of views, but they're never like right or left. It's just whatever makes the most sense, whatever that is. So I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm just in the middle, voicing my opinion when something spikes up and I've got a viewpoint on it that isn't necessarily always leaning to the left, whether it's protests and stuff. Like, yeah, I'm for social equality and stuff, but I'm not for the looting and rioting approach. So it's not right. It's not left. I'm in the middle. I just, whatever I feel like is my truth. And I feel like people have lost that. They're like, no, I'm on the right, so I have all the right point of views. I'm on the left, I have all the left's point of views. I just don't get that. I'm not with that. And one thing I want to talk about is the Clippers head coach Doc Rivers coming out and saying, we love this country. We just want them to love us back. And to me, he was watching Rambo First Blood Part 2 when at the end of that film, Rambo's saying, I want what they want, what we all want, for our country to love us as much as we love it. I feel like Doc Rivers is like, they're going to ask me something. I know I heard something in Rambo. I'm going to watch that and kind of spin it and create a summary out of that, summarize that into my own words, and just spew that out there because it just rung so true to Rambo First Blood Part 2. It has to be stolen from that. He had to plagiarize that.
I want what they want. And every other guy who came over here and spilt his guts and gave everything he had once for our country to love us as much as we love it. That's what I want.
Yeah, you're right. And maybe Doc Rivers will soon be found living in Thailand stick fighting after making such a comment. But hey, the NBA is going to do what they're going to do. Viewership's been down. This bubble thing, it has worked as far as keeping people COVID-free. Has it worked with regards to viewership? You heard Kevin Kietzman say it. The Lakers didn't even care about their first game against the Trailblazers. There's been some good games in there, but it just doesn't have the feeling. It's not NBA basketball, playoff basketball the way that we're used to in packed arenas. So, hey, they're getting games in, they're playing them, they're going to get back into doing this, and they made their point, and they're going to go back to playing. So we'll see if this sort of bleeds over, or if this is like a lot of things in the media that comes and goes. We forget about it, we forget the names of those involved, and then that's it. I have a problem with that kind of as well. But as we look forward, we have a lot of big shows still coming up. We're ready to launch headfirst into the football season here, guys. We're going to get a lot of guests, a lot of great stuff. Coming up next week, our good friend, former Kansas City Chiefs cornerback, former Pro Bowler, Brandon Flowers is going to be joining us. I can't wait to catch up with Brandon, see what he's been up to since he retired. Man, he retired in 2017. It's unbelievable. He got drafted by the Chiefs in 2008. So a 10-year career for Brandon Flowers. And we're going to see what he's been up to. Can't wait to catch up with him. We got a lot more tremendous shows coming up, including Noah, the running mate of Lawrence Taylor, Leonard Marshall, one of the great New York Giants of all time, is going to be joining us in just a couple weeks. Do we got a lot to look forward to here on this show?
Oh, absolutely. We got a lot more coming after that, and we'll just kind of leave those out there as a teaser for you to keep listening to hear what's coming next after those two. But Brandon Flowers, just a great corner here. I guess when Andy Reid and John Dorsey came to town, they liked the taller corners, so Brandon's on the shorter side, so they moved on from him. But Pro Bowl corner, he had great years here in Kansas City. His running mate, Brandon Carr, is a free agent now, but he played in the last 2 years more than Brandon Flowers played. So we're wondering if Brandon Flowers could come back and give the Chiefs anything, as Bashaud Breeland is serving a 4-game suspension to start the season. So we'll see if Flowers can come back and help us at all. And yeah, the great Leonard Marshall, 2-time Super Bowl champion with the New York Giants, those great teams. I'm sure he's got a lot of stories about Lawrence Taylor and Bill Parcells, so we'll have to pull those out of him as well.
We want to thank you guys for staying with us through all these crazy months. We are ready to dive headfirst into football season. I've never been more ready. But with that being said, we can't thank you guys enough, because without you guys, this podcast could have shut down. If nobody listened, nobody cared, nobody wanted to hear 100%. These interviews, we could be done. And, we do a lot of things. We have our hand in a lot of areas. We're finishing work on a SEC football documentary. If this podcast wasn't your thing, that's fine. We could have easily called this a day, but you know what? We are remaining steadfast. We cannot thank you guys enough. The website, as always, gasnsports.com. Yes, the Great American Sports Network. That is the umbrella to which all of our our goings-on fall under. The Elite Sports Podcast, guys, as always, available on Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Hit us up. Leave a review, preferably a 5-star one if you enjoyed it, and that keeps us going. That keeps us able to continue to have guests on the show and to keep things rolling on our end, guys. So thank you so much. We cannot wait to join you next week here on the Elite Sports Podcast with Brandon Flowers.